All right, I think we might want to get started. Hi everyone. Welcome officially to the Business of Design interview series. We're so pleased to mark the 10th anniversary of our CEO, Keith Granet's important book with this series, where we've been interviewing top designers throughout the year about how they've succeeded in the business of design. For those of you who may not yet be familiar with Studio Designer, let's just give you a bit of an introduction. Studio Designer is the leading digital project management, product sourcing, and accounting platform for the interior design industry. Our fully integrated platform features an all-in-one project management system, client collaboration portal, product sourcing tools, and designer-specific accounting software. For over 30 years, Studio Designer has enabled the world's leading designers to drive efficiency and growth, save time, and deliver beautiful projects. Just in terms of housekeeping, we're going to let Keith and Suzanne take it away in just a minute. But if you have questions during the discussion, please submit them using the Q&A button during the discussion, and then we'll open it up to questions at the end. So we are closing out our interview series this year with the legendary designer, Suzanne Tucker, who is an inspirational force in this industry. Her enduring style, detail-oriented personal approach, and especially her love for architecture and the decorative arts are reflected in her breathtaking interiors. So now, without further ado, we're going to pass it over to Keith and Suzanne.
Thank you, Rachel. Welcome, everybody. It's exciting to be here, especially today with Suzanne, who I would say is, what can I say, Suzanne?
I know.
We've had a long history of working together, but mostly our friendship is what's most important. And it's so great to see you and for you to be a part of this. So thank you for doing this.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
It's good. So let's just jump right in. I mean, we can talk about a million things and it might be hard to control us, but let's start with the business you've built and what you've seen sort of as the most challenging times through the years, or what's been the most challenge in building the business for you.
Well, interestingly enough, people always say, oh, how did you started off your company and you had a plan and you envisioned doing all of this. And the truth is, no, I didn't have a plan. I had a degree in design. I'd studied interior architecture. I was going to go on to architecture school, but when I learned that you had to do a lot of math, I was like, oh, that sounds too boring. No, didn't want to do the math. So I didn't go on to architecture school. And worked for a few really good interior designers. First one in London actually was Peter Hood, who had been one of John Fowler's last assistants. So I learned an amazing amount with him. And then I came to San Francisco, and all my friends, everyone said, oh, you have to go work for Michael Taylor. And I was like, oh, but I've come from England, and all Michael did was rocks and trees and everything was white. And that's what you saw in magazines. Well, cut to the chase, because there's a long story about how I got that job. But I worked with Michael, and that was where you get the PhD, because that was definitely trial by fire. And then when Michael died in 1986, Tim Marks and I talked about starting a company together. And at that point, I had a 6-month-old baby. And I said, well, my days of working, that 9 to 5 thing are over right now. I mean, I've got a baby, I've got life, and a husband who was supportive, but didn't really want me to work. And Tim, of course, said, don't worry, you do the decorating and I'll do everything else and manage the business and all the accounting. And so I said, oh, great. Well, little did I know that, your own business means not 9 to 5. It means 24/7, 365 plus. So the challenges of starting a company, and certainly coming from Michael Taylor, and we originally named our company Michael Taylor Associates, and learned really quickly that it's not like good old Morgan, JP Morgan, and you name the bank after him and that name goes on in perpetuity and stands for, strong banking and finances. Design isn't like that. They know what Michael Taylor did. They, what, John Fowler did. They want to know what you do. They want to know, the client wants to know who you are, what your taste is, what your eye is. So we quickly changed the name. And I think the biggest challenge was certainly determining sort of, how to set up a business, how to keep going. And, the phone rings, the phone doesn't ring. Everyone has those times when you're starting out. But I would certainly say to people, get your systems in place. And because you can have the most wonderful taste, you can be super talented, but that's oftentimes how designers will fail, because they don't actually have stronger bookkeeping behind them and the strong systems that you need. So, I think those are the initial challenges, but I'd say over the years, certainly the challenges have been growing a business and growing quickly. We grew very fast. And that always has its own set of challenges, and how you juggle workloads, and do you hire more staff? Do you not hire more staff? And I never count. My husband always counts, but we're like 33 or 34 in staff, I think now. And did I ever plan that? Heavens no. But you need to, I will say, hire to your weaknesses, hire to then support and put good people around you. So building a company where I have great staff, I love them. They're terrific. They're dedicated, hardworking, all those things that you want and expect that you yourself would give. That is probably the key to building a successful company. And in design, it's customer service. Treat your customers well. Just never forget, you're in the service business, number one, and you're in the beauty business, number two. So service your clients well and make them look beautiful.
Oh, nice. How often do you run into, your name being on the door and it's only wants you, even though the clients might have relationships with your seniors? Does that happen frequently?
A lot. Yeah, it usually does. And I've learned to say, after all these years, I've learned to say to my clients or potential new clients that I know exactly what you need me for, and I know when I need to be the one to step in, and I empower my staff, and that's really critical. We are a we company, not an I company. So it's important that I train everyone who comes through the door. You say we, not I. And we are a collective team. We are supportive. Whoever makes the mistake, and mistakes of course happen, they're always my mistakes. No matter what, my name's on the door. It's my mistake. It's my screw up. It's up to me to fix it. You don't throw an employee under the bus. And same in turn, the employee doesn't say, well, I this, I that. No, it's a we approach. And clients think that they just need me. That's not the case. Certainly if I've trained my staff well, but also I've found that when I tell my staff, invoke my name, and sometimes there's an ego that gets in the way there, and people say, because like, well, I shouldn't have to use your name. And I said, get over that, use my name, because that actually empowers you. If you say, Suzanne asked me to show you XYZ, Suzanne really likes this one, and this is the second best that she would, like you to choose. What the client is hearing is that you have the hotline to me. You actually know what I like. You actually know what I would say. And that empowers the employee and your senior staff members. And that's a funny hurdle for some people to get over, because they think it's all about them, and it's so not.
And I repeat what you say all the time, or what you just said all the time, because it does truly empower them and the client's respect for them.
Yes.
And what I do say is the only time you can ever say, what do you think, is when the clients ask you directly, give me your opinion, but until that point, you should always refer both to we or Suzanne says, because they'll be
Absolutely.
more successful for sure.
No, absolutely. And it's right, because when a client asks, well, what do you think? Then that's the invitation to evoke. That's the invitation to say, well, I really like this one as well, or I like this one because, and then you have your own voice as a senior staff person or a designer. But it's interesting, I learned a long time ago, I got a phone call from an irate client who was really rather snooty. And she said, your assistant came over here and brought me these fabrics and proceeded to tell me what they liked. And I don't care what they liked. I want to know what you liked. And it was definitely a bit of a, and I kind of went, okay, fine, but it taught me that lesson. So, all those unpleasant things are our lessons in life.
Yeah, that's good. So years ago, when we first started working together, you had a lot of goals, which I'm sure you still do. But one of them was Suzanne Tucker Home, to do a product line.
Mm-hmm.
Where did that inspiration come from?
You. Well, because truly, I remember distinctly that sort of meeting, and you turned to me and you said, what do you want to do 5-10 years from now? What's the vision? What dream? And that was sort of the opening for me to then say, ooh, anything. Okay. I like that. And that was when I said, well, I'd like to write a book. And ooh, I want to start a textile line. And we made this list, and guess what? You put it out there, to sound California woo-woo, but you put it out there in the universe, and you put it on paper and you put it in your mind. Those things will happen. And I'm a big believer in that. So careful what you wish for. But but yes, actually it was you, Keith, when we sat down. That was a long time ago. And that, again, you empowered me to dig deep and say, ooh, dream, what would I like? And yeah, that's lovely. Thank you.
Of course. But it's funny when you say empower you to dream. What I probably also should have recognized is how big you dream. Because when you said, I want to do a fabric line, you went in with both feet, like,
oh boy,
and big.
Oh yeah,
and,
yeah.
And
and no oxygen tanks. I just went deep.
But and it shows in the beauty of the product, for sure. But I think that you've never done anything less than that in your career that I know of, that didn't take diving with both feet, or jumping with both feet, I should say.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think that's the passion you have for this industry. One of the things that I remember very distinctly is a conversation you and I had about sort of, not necessarily competition, but other designers who may be up for the same project, and how you treat each other. And I remember you saying, clients are going to come and go, even employees may come and go, but our colleagues, we have to respect each other. And I think that you've held that role, in a way is very respectful within the industry, but also as a peer, how you treat the people in your world, both, whether it's being collegial or sharing, or, your role with ICAA, all of that is about sort of being a bigger part of a community. And I think it says a lot, because it's easy just to, be in our own worlds and do our own, but really you're affecting a community. And I have to believe that's just part of your DNA.
It is. It definitely is. And thank you for saying that and acknowledging that, because it is something that I have very consciously worked at for years. You know, some of it is the golden rule: treat others how you want to be treated. So there's that aspect. There's also the fact that, you know, when I came to San Francisco and I got my foot in the door with Michael Taylor, you know, it was such a catty world, and it was sort of the height of the gay world here in San Francisco for sure. And sorry, but just a lot of bitchy queens. And Michael was probably ahead of them. But you know, there was Michael Hale, I'm sorry, Tony Hale, Michael Taylor, Billy Gaylord, there was Scott Lamb, there was, you know, there were all these men in the industry, and they were so mean and backstabbing and catty about each other. And it was just so unnecessary, first off. And secondly, just that negativity, you know, who wants that? Who wants to be dealing with that? So I got a really heavy dose of that when I first moved here. And I just saw what I didn't want my life to be. And I chose differently. I chose to be supportive of my colleagues. I refused to get into that competitive mode, because I truly believe the right projects come your way, that the right project is meant to go to that person. I've referred my colleagues when I didn't feel a project was right for me. And, you know, again, I mean, not to throw out these cliches, but what goes around comes around. And I can pick up the phone today and call anyone, any colleague about anything. And I, in turn, want them to be able to do the same thing with me. They need advice, they need help. If there's a terrible client out there, alert your colleagues. Yeah, done that before. That's a good one. But yeah, that's, you know, it's such a better way to be in life for me.
No, and completely. All right, so let's talk about the best clients. What do you think makes the best clients?
Well, it was funny about, I don't know, 10 years ago or so, someone asked me, how do I choose my clients? And without even a thought in my head, it came right out of my mouth: nice people. And I was like, oh, you know what? Nice people. So I don't care how much money someone has. I don't care how much they don't have. I don't care how big the project is. I don't care how small the project is. If they're not nice people, who wants that job? Forget it. You know, I'll tell young designers, don't be afraid to walk away. Don't be afraid to say no. It's the scariest thing to do. But you don't want to get in bed with a horrible client. And it's just, it makes life miserable. And I've had colleagues call me and say, you know, this job you turned down, I took, and it's a nightmare. What do you think I should do? But I think that, you know, the best client is certainly that client who is a nice person. They are thoughtful, they are considerate, they're trusting. But you know, the one I told you ages ago is that when you interview for a project and you go to their house, and if they don't even offer you a glass of water, well, that speaks volumes about someone, about their consideration to you and how they approach people. So,
Do you know that
certainly,
of all the things I've written in my first book, that comment comes back time and time again, like how absolutely right you are about that.
yeah, that was funny. I heard someone say, well, Granet said, da, 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 da. And I'm like, well, I know where he got that one from, but anyway. But yeah, it's so true. And it's so simple. So, you know, the best clients are certainly the ones who have more of those personal characteristics. And yeah, if they've got, you know, deep pockets and they've got a great project down to hand you, sure, that's wonderful. That's not every project, that's not every client. And you can feel equally as rewarded as a designer and working on the tiniest project as you can the biggest. And sometimes the biggest aren't the best. It really varies. And I will say trust your instinct, because that client who values what you bring to the table, they understand that they've hired a professional. Those are key things. The client who tries to micromanage you, the client who tries to tell you how you should run your business, no, that's not what you need. And so I think those are the keys to sort of looking at clients. And I do think you get to a point in your career where you are interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you, because it's a long-term relationship, and it's the most intimate of the relationships when you've got a team, meaning you have an architect, you have a landscape designer, you have a contractor, you have the designer. You are the one at the hub. You're the most involved on the most intimate level with that client, because you're really into like how they live. How do they shave their legs? Do they shave their legs? Do they wax their legs? Does he shave in the shower? Does he shave in a mirror? I mean, all these, those are intimate things that you get to know about people. Of course, there's the X-rated stories that I can't tell now, but there are a few of those.
Those are the things you find in the closets.
Yeah, that was a good one. Yeah, that box got sealed up and put away right away.
I often say that the best clients are the ones that allow you to educate them and want to be educated about the process. And clearly the ones who trust you. Without trust, there's nothing.
No, exactly. It's funny. I had the weirdest comment come at me from, actually, he was really a shady character. He interviewed me. He interviewed another one of my colleagues. He wanted to negotiate my contract, and I said no. He was shocked that I wouldn't negotiate, and I said, no, I don't need to. My contract's fair. It's fair to you. It's fair to me. I'll negotiate on your behalf for things, but I said, but my contract's fair. And he said, well, I have to think about it. Well, 6 months later, he hired someone locally, and she called me and she said, he told me that you had dropped your fees and your percentage. And so I did the same thing in order to get the job. And he lied to her, and I hadn't done that, nor had my other colleague. And it was just a very bad situation, and he wasn't paying her. And I saw him at a social event, and I was chatting with his wife, who was very nice. And he came up and she reminded him, who I was. And he said, oh yeah, you're one of those decorators. He said, I look at decorators like football coaches. You either just about to be fired or you've just been fired.
What?
I was so offended. I was so insulted by this man. And I knew at the time who he had hired, and a very good designer. And I looked at him and I just said, you treat him with respect, and because I had nothing to lose. And I said, you treat him with respect, you honor what he does. It's a profession. And I said, and if you can't do that, you shouldn't be involved. And I walked away. I was so disgusted by this person. But it's interesting. It's that attitude towards design. And part of that is because, unlike architects, we're not regulated. We don't have to have licenses. Anybody can hang out a shingle and say, oh yes, I'm a decorator, I'm a designer, whatever, I'm an acrobat. You don't need authorization or even education. And I won't go on that tangent, but that's one of the bugaboos that I have about the industry. And it makes people like that man look down on the industry, which is not right. As we all know, it is hard work, number one. It's not a glamour business. And you have to be very dedicated. You have to be very passionate about this industry. And being in the Bay Area, where we've got, big tech companies, and you've got, 22-year-olds making $500,000 a year. And if that's what someone's after, that's what they should do. You have to be passionate about design. You have to love design. you have to, it has to ring your bells in order for you to stay in this business. It's hard work.
Yeah, it is. And it's really key to listen to your gut, like you said.
Yeah,
And make sure that you're saying no to the wrong client, because we all know a wrong client can just take down a firm. I mean,
absolutely. Mhm.
so what about employees? What makes the best employee?
Good employee. Well, that dedication I talked about, that passion for design, that desire to be in this business, and it doesn't mean you're the creative side of it. It could also be the support side of it. It can be the project management side of it. It can be the expediting side of it, but you just like that creative world. You like being around creative people. So I think first and foremost, that the interest, the passion. I think a good employee is always someone who looks at their colleagues with the respect of, let me help you. There's no job too big, too small. I mean, if I can wipe down the bathroom sink, so can anybody else. And I think that's the key, is that we're all in this together. And, some people might have a greater skill set or a bigger education or more responsibility, but you've got to be supportive of each other and pitch in. And none of this, oh, that's not in my job description. I mean, if I hear that, that sends me to the roof. I'm just like, don't ever say that to me. Because in this business, you do it all. And so I think a good employee is someone who has that dedication and is just willing to go the extra mile. I think that's really, really what it takes. And the desire to learn, and the desire in the creative side of it, the desire to learn and to stay curious and to want to understand. Like, I love it when an employee says to me, why did you pick that fabric over that one? And I go, oh, let me tell you. And I can explain why. That to me shows real depth and interest. But if you're just a note taker, are you really learning? Stay curious, take courses, all those things. And I'm very fortunate. I've had extraordinary employees over the years. And there's been a few bad apples. And you figure those out pretty quickly. You're either meant to be together, you're meant to fit. And people say, oh my God, how can you stand having so many employees? Well, it's kind of like a roommate. When you've got a good roommate, it's great. When you have a bad roommate, it's horrible. So when they're all, good apples, it's great.
Perfect.
Everyone hums along.
That was odd. Somebody just jumped in.
That was
No,
odd. Yeah.
because
Oh.
don't worry about that. We have you on.
That's
the
weird.
Client meeting all afternoon.
Hold on, please.
So her and Amanda will be in that from 1:30. I just wanted to make sure that you girls
Mute.
got what you needed today, because tomorrow.
There we go. All right, Suzanne, you come back.
Goodness, don't know what that was.
I think it was your assistant.
It was. It was her.
She just didn't have
We were
herself
talking about employees just now. Be careful what you say.
It's all good. So let's go to studio for a second, since that's what this is all about. You are a very early user. I mean, I actually remember the story that you've shared, but I'd love for you to share it with everybody. Like, how did that come about?
Well, fortunately, I had a business partner from the get-go who recognized that he was going to be, as I say, it's nuts and bolts, and he was going to be the bolts because I was the nuts. And Tim really was the one to set up and establish, the accounting systems and all of that. I actually looked back on when we started with what was then called Impact. It was 1989, which is amazing. And we had sort of heard about this. It started out in Colorado. They came to San Francisco. I hosted a group of designers to listen to this, and we signed on board. And we needed it. I mean, every firm needs to have good systems in place. And, it served us well. I mean, over the years, there's, been a lot of growth. And because we grew so much, we demanded more of the systems. But, studio is a game changer in terms of where you've taken it, Keith. And my staff love it. They absolutely love it. And just the ease of working with it and what it can do for us and how we can customize it. And yeah, no, nothing but kudos there.
Great. Yeah. We've had, as you know, great success, especially as we got everyone, or not everyone yet, but most people off to the cloud. So it's, and especially, during the pandemic, we needed to make sure that people could work remotely. And I know you guys in the beginning struggled with that. And so hopefully it's a lot easier now.
Yeah, what the struggle was for us? I don't actually know if it was about studio itself, because these fingers actually don't touch that. But I love computers. I love gadgets. I love all the technology. I'm the techie nerd in the office for sure. But the challenge for us with closing down during the pandemic was that, of course, we all thought it was going to be 2 weeks, and then it was going to be a month. But the shocking thing for Tim and me was to realize how many of the sort of 20 and 30-year-olds didn't have computers at home. And that was a real eye-opener for us. They have iPads, iPhones, but they don't have computers at home. The computers they use were here at the office. So we had to buy everyone computers and get them all set up from home and do all of that. So that was sort of the first big hurdle. And then, it does work once you get the whole systems all in place and so forth. It does work well. And there was one thing you asked the others about if there was one thing that you could improve on. I actually did my homework and I asked around my studio. So I'm not sure this is an improvement. This is something that we'd like to see, which is they want to be able to attach a PDF to the purchase order, not have it be a link. Because by having it be a link, you're relying on the vendor to open that link. Whereas when we send out a purchase order and there's a drawing attached, or details attached, a PDF, that's what we need them to see. So being able to attach a PDF, there you go.
Yeah, it's either that, or I think you can take the PDF and put it into an image and then attach it to your purchase order so that it's an image, so that they don't have to go to another link.
Yes, you can attach a JPEG. You can attach a photo, you can attach a JPEG, but again, then you've got a scale issue. So it's more about the drawings, because we do so much with drawings, and interior architecture, and we draw all of our upholstery, we draw all of our custom pieces. So I think that's what they're saying, is that they want to be able to, I mean, they could convert it to a JPEG. They want to be able to attach that PDF directly. So anyway, that's food for thought.
All right, we'll put it on the wish list.
Okay.
We have a big wish list, but it's all great to hear, because we know that we need to always constantly evolve. The world does change, and we want to be. I said to my team the other day, I don't want to be Kodak. I don't want to wake up one day and realize that we didn't take digital seriously. Obviously, digital very seriously, but as a company, Kodak didn't do that. And
so I'm going to tell a funny story then on my husband, Tim. So, and this is very much along the lines of don't be Kodak. So, oh my God, it had to have been in the 80s. I'd have to look back, and me and time, not really good. But there was this new gadget called a facsimile machine that had been invented. And I was like, we need this. We need to get one of these machines. This is so cool. And Tim was like, no one's ever going to use these. This is just, no one's going to use those. And I'm like, yes, they are. We need to buy one of these. And I think at the time it was like $800 or something. And And he's like, no, forget it. We're not spending the company's money on this gadget. And I'm like, well, then I'm going to buy it. So I bought our first facsimile machine. It's always been a joke in the office because Tim was resistant and said, no one's ever going to use these. Well, guess what? We all did. And now they're complete white elephants. No one uses them at all. But that's the Kodak thing. You don't want to be Kodak. You want to keep up with things. You want to keep up with, you know, whether it's fashion and style and looks or gadgets and gizmos, you got to stay current.
And it's a fast moving world, as we know.
It's a fast moving world. Yeah. And it's funny because in design, you know, some clients will say to me, well, I'm seeing all these things that look like, you know, whatever. And I'll say, yeah, that's just trends, you know, and they'll say, well, should I change my house to look like that? And my first question is, well, do you like that look? And they're like, well, not really. And well, then don't. You know, design is not fashion. Fashion is trends. Design needs to be timeless. Design needs to evolve. And it's not a trendy thing, you know, unless you have $1 million to do your living room and then change it in 2 years when you're bored with it because it's not on trend, and go for it.
You know, one of the things I love about you is you do have a love for technology, and like gadgets and fun stuff, and all along it's like, what's the latest, greatest thing? Tell me about it. I mean, you always explored that. Besides, yet when you look at your work, it is timeless, and it's, you know, it doesn't look like somebody who would love technology. It looks like an artist, right? So the fact that you have those two, and you've run a very successful business, shows you're using both sides of your brain.
Yeah, actually, yes, no, I like using both sides of my brain. I think that's maybe the success of being a really good designer, is being able to use both sides, step into both sides of your brain. And yes, I thank you for the comments and the compliments about my work, because I would never want it to look as though it is, you know, of the digital age. I mean, that to me is like the Jetsons or something, or Sleeper with Woody Allen. And actually, it's funny, I saw working on a really modern house right now, and the plans came in from the architect, and I took one look at them and I said, this looks like Charles de Gaulle Airport from the 60s. And of course, you know, my 30-something-year-old, you know, design staff sitting next to me didn't know what I was talking about. And I said, this does not look modern. This looks dated. There's a difference. There's a big difference. And so I always try to, you know, keep that sort of tension, what I call, with a client who wants a traditional look. I want to give them something that's also going to be a little bit contemporary in there, so that it doesn't look dated, because that's a big key. And certainly with color palettes and things like that. And then there's the clients who just want contemporary, and great, but you know me, I always say you've got to have something of soul in a room, and you have to have something of age in a room, and you don't want to be the oldest thing in the room. So, you know, I try to educate the clients in both directions, and to me, those are the most successful projects. They're not the ones that unfortunately get published, because my clients won't let me publish them, and that's really a drag, I have to admit.
Yeah.
I know many of my colleagues, we all lament that fact, and I understand the client standpoint, I certainly do, but they don't quite realize how critical it is for us, for our business, and the acknowledgement, and just how proud we are also of creating beautiful homes for people.
Well, and to work for many years on a project and not for anybody to see it, it's very frustrating.
I know, it is frustrating. It's yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we're going to run out of time, of course, because that's who we are.
Of course. Yeah.
But I want to ask you how the pandemic sort of changed or affected the business.
Well, I mentioned about having to get everyone set up with home computers and doing all that, which was, a challenge because everyone was buying home computers. So there was that. But I got fed up with it pretty quickly, personally, me. I just, after a month of working from home, I just said, I can't do this. I can't work from behind a computer. I need my stuff. I need to touch things. I need to see things. And so I just started coming back into the office on my own. I mean, there was no COVID police checking to see if offices were empty. So I just came downtown, and it was kind of weird. It was like Armageddon down here. There wasn't a soul, including the homeless. They were all gone because they lost their jobs too. It's what I needed to do. I needed to get back into my office and be able to work from here. And, I have a massive library and so forth. And then gradually some people started coming back in. And finally, we said June 1st, we said, enough's enough. You're all getting vaccinated and you're all showing back up for the office. And everyone did, except for one. And that was great. And everyone loved it, coming back in with the renewed energy and just to be together. We're not a computer business. We are a collaborative, collective thinking industry. We need each other to bounce ideas, and Zoom is fabulous and FaceTime is great, but to be together in the same room and to hear what someone is saying across the room and to work collaboratively on design and plans around a table, there's no substitute. And I've had one of my colleagues say that their firm was even more productive working remotely, which goody for them. I don't know how that really works. I think we are much more productive when we're together. And it has impacted us all. I mean, let's face it, the biggest impact internally, I think, is just how to figure out how to keep juggling. But the bigger impact externally has been to the clients. They are the ones who have the hard time understanding why is this taking so long? And I ordered this, 9 months ago, and there's that constant reassurance. There's the constant explanation, and I call it the Cove of Dance. It's 4 steps forward, 3 steps back, stop, pause, repeat. And it's just where we are. So you got to roll with it. You can't fight it.
So are you fully back? Is everybody back?
Oh yeah, as of June 15th. I said enough's enough. Everyone's back. Yeah. And everyone's vaccinated, and we wear masks in the office when you're walking around. If you're at your desk, you don't need to. Clients are comfortable coming back in now. And downtown is still weird. It's not like New York. New York feels great. San Francisco, sadly, is not coming back as fast as New York. It doesn't have the vibrancy. There's a lot of empty shops. But our work, we're really busy. We just installed an enormous project. It was a year delayed because of COVID. But I say it was only a year delayed. It could have been much worse. All of our workrooms are completely backed up. I'm having to take a lot of my custom upholstery now. I have it done out of New York. I'm looking elsewhere to have things fabricated versus just right here in my own backyard. So again, we're in the creative business. You got to start thinking creatively about how to think outside the box, how to get something done. That I think is the challenge.
Yeah, I mean, the supply chains have been blocked in everything from, furniture to foam. You
Yes.
can't get a refrigerator because there's no foam.
Yep, that's correct. That's absolutely correct. Try buying a car right now. That's difficult because of the parts, the gadgets, the widgets. It's also, in the Bay Area, we see all these freighters sitting out there outside of the Golden Gate Bridge waiting to come in. And we had an entire 30,000 square foot house of stone that just sat out there for 3 months. And yeah, so it's like, what do? You can't do anything. You just have to hurry up and wait. And there's things like that that just are beyond your control. And again, going back to our very first point we talked about is servicing the customer. The best thing I have found is that you need to preempt the issues. So you go to them with the problems before they come to you. And you let the client know, here's a problem, here's the issue, here's how we're resolving it, we'll let you know. Versus the client calling up and saying, this is a problem, da, 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 da. If you approach them first, it really, really diffuses the potential blow up that they would have. So
you really want to surprise a client in anything, whether it's an invoice, whether it's anything, because it just comes back to bite you.
Yeah.
So I want to leave some time so that we can ask the audience for some questions.
Okay.
So let's jump to that. Lauren, do we have, or Rachel, do we have questions?
Yes, we have a couple. The first is from Emily. She asked, what are some examples of systems other than bookkeeping that you recommend a new business owner get into place?
A great question. I would say your library. As you start to build your library, get a library system in place. There's a number of things online that you can, for books, specific library, for a book of library, library of books. And I have an enormous library, and I wish 30 years ago I had started logging my books in. But I would say that's one thing. And then also your library of resources and your stuff, fabrics, stones, hardware. Start building your systems of how you're going to track your materials. And then every single decorator, designer starts to accumulate inventory for various reasons or another. So I also say, get that system in place too, because you want that at your fingertips so that you can resell those items and repurpose those items. So yeah, those are other examples of systems.
One of the things we've talked about at Studio is, because we can see everybody's inventory if they put it into Studio, there are something like, I don't know, I think it's like $25 million worth of product out there. And to allow designers to share and say, here's what's in our inventory. If you'd like to, you don't have to open it up to them, but you can choose to. And it creates a new marketplace of just peers that could be awesome for people to remove their inventory.
That's a really great idea. As long as we can selectively put out there what inventory pieces you would want, because I think secretly we're all a little bit hoarders, and there's some things that you don't want to sell that you just want to hold on to because of course my husband would put
he'd put everything on for sure, but
Tim would put everything on it, and I'm like, no, I don't want to sell that yet. I want to hold on to it. But yes, if you can do that, that'd be great.
Tim might even put furniture at home on there.
oh, absolutely. Get rid of this thing. I'm like, no, so yeah, so I would say yes, inventory for sure, those kind of systems in place, and also just your best practices, consistency in how your paperwork looks. That establishes you as a professional. How you deliver packages, are they just thrown in any old bag, or are they in nice bags with your logo on it? And that doesn't have to be expensive. It can be a white bag with, tie it with pretty tissue and a ribbon, but that's consistent. So I think there's things that establishing one as a designer and how every single detail that gets put in front of a client needs to be attractive.
Good advice.
This is another question from Francisco. I love the golden rule approach you mentioned with working with colleagues. What are your thoughts regarding working well with all the trades? And in particular, how do you handle it when they underperform?
Well, that would depend on how they're underperforming. I mean, okay, I think everyone has underperformed in the last 18 months because of COVID. So there's a good reason there. Like, we get it. We get that you couldn't deliver. We get that you couldn't get foam. We get that you lost your, half your staff to, COVID outbreaks and all of that. So it does depend on how they're not performing. But I think, again, this is a trust factor, and to be truthful. And, I find sometimes that the vendor, they don't want to disappoint you. So they'll start giving you sort of, oh, well, we're working on it. Oh, well, it's here. Oh, this and that. And, if something doesn't smell quite right, explore it and just say, okay, is this really in production? I'm going to show up. I'm going to show up at your door. I want to see this. And if you find that they're just giving you a lot of BS, then that's the time to pull it and say, I'm taking this elsewhere unless you can perform. And that's a hard thing to do, especially if it's a colleague who you've worked with for a while. But, they don't want to disappoint either. Just like you don't want to disappoint your clients, you are their client. They don't want to disappoint you. They want to deliver a beautiful product to you, and they want you to be happy, and they want you to come back for more. So, work with the best vendors that you can, or that your clients can afford. You'll never regret that.
I just to add on to that, remember years ago, I was asked to come consider working with a very notable firm, and I did some homework, and I asked a bunch of vendors, what do you think of them? And it was during a time when the market was booming, much like it is today. And they said they get our attention because they're very professional. They pay their bills on time. They don't ask for too many rushes or favors. They treat us with respect. And I think that the professionalism you offer your vendors says a lot about, because they're going to have the choice, like, who pays their bills? I'm going to do their work first. So if you're that firm that can act, that they can trust and rely on for their business, then you're going to get the attention. And if they're not that type of a vendor that can service you, then you're right, you should move on.
Yeah, no, I would totally agree. And if you're finding that all of your vendors are, underperforming, then I think you need to look at yourself and say, okay, are you paying on time? Are you giving them deposits? Are you treating them well? And, what goes around comes around. And we've all had to ask a lot of favors of our vendors in the last year and a half. And there does get to be a saturation point where enough is enough. And I don't want to ask for any more of those favors. They've all jumped through hoops. We've all jumped through hoops. And, I think if you're not being treated well and you're treating them well, then you gotta look elsewhere.
Yeah. Rachel, I think we have time for one more question, if we have one.
Yeah. So here's one from David. He asks, what's the most important way for a young designer with no connections to get a foothold in luxury interior design?
With no connections. Well, if you just want to be in the industry and you don't have any education in the industry, you should go and get an education. You should take some courses. There's great, extension courses, or take a Sotheby's or a Christie's course, New York School of Interior Design, Academy of Art University here. There's a lot of vehicles. If you do have that education under your belt, then you actually do have connections. And put yourself out there. When I first came to San Francisco, I could not get a job in design. They weren't available. And everywhere I was met, the door closed on me. And it was really hard. And I sent my resume out to every single designer that I thought I wanted to work with. And no one was hiring, or they wanted men. I was a woman. It was really against me being a woman. And it didn't really matter that I had my design degree. So, you know, I had a lot of rejects and knocked on a lot of doors. And when I actually did interview for Michael Taylor, I wasn't interviewing for a design job. I was interviewing for an expediter job. I didn't even know what an expediter did. And when I was in the interview, I found out that they'd already hired someone, and sure enough, they'd hired a guy. And I was so discouraged. And then the guy interviewing me said, "Oh, but Michael needs a good secretary." And don't ask me what possessed me to bite my tongue, because I wasn't really known for that, nor am I. But I bit my tongue and I thought, okay, maybe this is my foot in the door. And I just said, well, what's involved? And he told me what's involved in being a secretary. Now, mind you, when he asked me the part about typing, all he said was, "I assume your typing skills are good." And I looked him dead in the eye and I said, "I'm extremely accurate." Well, I had been tested at 23 words a minute. So how can you not be accurate when you type at a snail's pace, like this? But my point of the story is, I got my foot in the door. I took a job that I really wasn't very qualified for, but I wanted to be in design. I had job offers from financial institutions, from stock brokerages, from venture capital companies, from computer companies, and I turned them all down because I wanted to be in design. And so my advice would be, there's a lot of ways to look for jobs these days. Certainly on all the vehicles, which you probably know, AD and Indeed, and there's headhunters out there. If you're qualified at some level, I can't believe you cannot get a job and get your foot in the door, because every one of my colleagues is hiring and looking for people. So either lower your expectations or rewrite your resume, but there's connections that you might be surprised you actually have.
Yeah, and I just want to add that if the question is about how to get started in your own business and you don't have any connections, I always say you should go work for somebody. You should gain that knowledge. They've all learned those lessons. So why not learn from people who have already learned versus just trying to hang your shingle out there and start? Always try to work for somebody before you start your own thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That, yes, go to work for somebody, go to work for the best person you can, and get that mentoring under your belt. And if you think you want to start your own business and you don't have connections, then I would say put your name in for show houses. And go down and also meet people at the design centers. Introduce yourself, get to know them. But honestly, showcases are the best way to hang out a shingle. And don't just do one. They're expensive to do, but if you can do 3 years in a row, then people really start to remember you. And yeah, it would be a good thing to do.
So not surprisingly, we are end of our time. So I hate to say goodbye, but this has been great. We don't have to, but we'll catch up on with ourselves.
We probably bored everyone. They're probably half asleep out there in webinar land.
No, I don't think so at all. I think those answers were great, and I really appreciate you doing this with me. I do miss you, so hopefully we'll see each other for too long.
I miss you too. I miss you too. And yeah, I'm headed to New York next week, so I'm excited about that. You're going to be there still.
No, I'm leaving on Sunday.
Just when I come into town. Well, don't buy out all the stores before I get there.
Okay, you can be sure that won't happen. But thank you.
Well, thank you for this. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Lauren and Rachel behind the scenes. And thank you, Keith, for inviting me, and I always love chatting with you.
Yeah, and we'll put this up.
And I'm just going to close this out. Thank you so much, Suzanne, just to echo. So wonderful to have you on. For those who still on, if you do want to learn more about Studio Designer, please come check us out at studiodesigner.com or come register for one of our live demos on Tuesdays, or just reach out to us directly. We'd love to share more about our platform. And since this is actually our final installment of the Business of Design interview series this year, we encourage everybody to come check out recordings of all the interviews we've done this year, where we'll be including this most recent conversation with Suzanne. And stay tuned for more coming next year. Thank you all so much and have a great day.
Thank you.